Hello everybody, my name is Valeria Galindo. This is my rebuttal video for debate 1 about the atomic bomb. So I will be refuting the argument that the US made the right decision by dropping the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So a few of the arguments that I heard in the videos that everyone else posted that was siding with side A, which defended the US's choice of dropping the bombs, talked about the deaths that were prevented by ending the war early instead of prolonging it. A few spoke about the economic waste that would have happened if the bombs hadn't been dropped, as well as mentioning some of the actions that the Japanese Empire took, which led the US to make the decision to drop the bombs. So for the first one was the actual dropping of the bombs. Due to the bombs that were dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, Little Boy and Fat Man, which were the names of the bombs that were dropped on the two cities, that resulted in approximately about 150,000 deaths of innocent Japanese civilians. So these weren't military people, these were civilians who unexpectedly had a bomb dropped on their cities, and they were immediately killed. So there was arguments made by some of the other people that number, the 150,000, doesn't compare to the total amount of deaths that occurred in the whole of World War II. But my response to that is that a human life lost is a human life lost. Just because the number of 150,000 doesn't compare to the millions that were lost as a sum of all the other countries that lost soldiers and that lost civilians, doesn't mean that that number is insignificant. It's still something that has to be acknowledged, that was a result of the US's decision to drop the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Second point was that someone made was the economic aspect. So for years, in 1941 is when in 1942 is when the Manhattan Project began, which is a project that was where the atomic bombs were created. So for 3 years, up until 1945, when the bombs were dropped, the technology and the bombs were being created in secret. So if we hadn't dropped those bombs, it would have been a waste, is what I heard from some of the other individuals. But my response to that point is that it wouldn't have been a waste. As we see things get invented all the time, and just because they're not being put to use doesn't completely disregard the scientific novelty of it being a new thing. The idea that they were created in and of itself is a different debate. The morality of creating such a destructive weapon, which now we've created an even more destructive weapon with nuclear bombs. But yeah, so the economic aspect that was put into the creation of the atomic bombs and the Manhattan Project wouldn't have gone to waste, as it was still something was still made, which was a scientific like a significant moment for science. Third, Pearl Harbor was obviously mentioned, as that was a result of the U.S. involvement in World War II after Pearl Harbor was bombed in 1941, and it was bombed by the Japanese. So some people mentioned the fact that if Japan had never bombed Pearl Harbor, the U.S. would have never gotten involved in the war and would have never bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But I think that mindset of viewing the dropping of the bombs as an act of vengeance isn't right for the context of political relations. Of course, the bombing of Pearl Harbor was a devastating occurrence in U.S. history with American lives lost, but seeking vengeance by killing innocent civilians of the country responsible isn't a justification, because just like American civilians don't have a complete choice in the decisions that our government makes with our military, same thing goes for the Japanese people, who had no choice in their emperor deciding to bomb Pearl Harbor. And then lastly, I did hear a few points made about the fact that we did drop 2 bombs on Japan. The first bomb, Little Boy, was dropped, and then 3 days later, Fat Man was dropped. Some points were made that the Japanese government should have surrendered after the first bomb was dropped, but instead they didn't, and so 3 days later we dropped the second bomb. I think saying Japan should have surrendered after the first bomb isn't a fair argument to, again, the context of the lives lost, because, again, the people didn't have a decision in deciding whether its government was going to surrender. The government made the choice that the 80,000 lives that were lost after the first bomb was dropped, for whatever reason, they chose not to back out. So those were just some of the points that I felt didn't hold so much claim. So that was my rebuttal for the argument that the U.S. was correct in dropping the bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima.